Hi everyone, my name is Marisa. For the first time in my life, I'm telling my story. It's not an easy story for a girl like me because my family and I have been through a lot. I will tell you why I hid my face until I was of age, but before I get ahead of myself, it was part of my own plan. A revenge plan. My mother and my brother used to work in the same lab that made drugs for the public. They were simple drugs. My mother was a nurse there, and my brother was an assistant. One day, my mother came home and told me that she had been offered a non-disclosure contract at work, which talked about some kind of experiment. That is, they wanted to make my mother a test subject for money. I talked her out of it, and she agreed with me, agreeing that it could be dangerous. But the very next day, I got a call from the hospital. Mom and my brother had been hospitalized. They were both in a serious condition. My brother only had time to tell me to find the camera footage and fell into a comatose state. As a result, Mom was 100% blind in her left eye and 98% blind in her other eye. When I found out about this, a man came into my mom's room. I knew him. He was the head of that lab. Mr. Guide told me to hang in there and also told me that he'd take care of all my mother and brother's medical expenses. Maybe someone else would have been relieved, but I hated him even then. I knew he was behind it all. Life was no longer the same, and the problems had just begun. I had no one to take care of me, and my aunt had abandoned my cousin Peter too. Since I was still a minor, Peter and I were placed in an orphanage, where we grew up. All these years, I'd been hatching a plan of revenge, and I dreamed of finding and destroying Mr. Guide. Peter and I grew up together, and I took care of him. Thanks to the orphanage sponsorship, we were well-fed and educated. Then I came of age and graduated. I cut off all contact with acquaintances and relatives. I lived like a shadow. I took a second name in the orphanage, and the real one only the director and I knew. No one else saw my face, and at the orphanage, I wore a mask every day. I even slept in it, saying it made me feel more comfortable. Upon my graduation from the orphanage, someone slipped me a letter saying that the tape I wanted was in the possession of Mr. Guide's son. I had no idea who had sent it, but I wanted to check it out. And in order to do that, I needed to get a job at his microcredit company. Mr. Guide's son's name was Eric. I got a job there as a cleaner, with access to all the floors and offices. On my first day on the job, I cleaned the chief's office, Eric's office. He walked in there. Without paying attention to me, I was mopping the floors. As he walked by, he dropped a file, and I had time to read it quickly and memorize the data. The paper was wet with water and the numbers were blurred. Eric was angry, shouting at the assistant.
How will I remember now? I don't even have a copy. Where are your hands, Steve?
It said Singapore's gross national product was $341,289 million a year in 2021. GDP per capita in 2020 was 93,397. In the current year, unemployment rate was only 2.2%. The chief and his assistant froze. I gasped and quickly went back to scrubbing the floors.
Who are you?
I'm the cleaning lady. I'm sorry, I misstepped.
No, thanks. You got that, Steve? You can go now. It's all clear. Thank you.
After that, they had a meeting in the hall where I cleaned up as well. Eric asked me again what I used to be and what I was studying. I told him that I'd completed a financial literacy course. In the evening, when I went out to the parking lot, I saw Eric standing there angry, calling someone, and his car wouldn't start. I opened the hood and realized his battery was dead, quickly lit the car up and was about to leave when Eric stopped me.
Thank you. Are you asking for a bonus?
In my head, I slowly choked him, but instead I smiled and said yes. Immediately, his father, Mr. Guide, showed up. I wasn't ready to see him again, and I put my head down, but he managed to pay attention to me. Eric told him about me, and Guide said,
Offer her a job if she's so valuable. What's your name, girl? His father asked.
Mary Grace.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Mr. Eric's father, Mr. John Guide. Your face looks familiar.
Thank you, sir, but this is the first time I've ever met you. I just came here, to this town.
Who are your parents? Where did they work?
I clenched my fists and said, They're cooks. They work in Utah.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Mary Grace. I see you're a valuable employee. Leave your resume tomorrow with Eric.
Yes, sir. I drove off, emotions running high, and I cried at the wheel on the way to my brother's hospital, then to my mother's nursing home. A day later, I was named a specialist. A month later, I was Eric's personal secretary. I hadn't thought of building a career that high, but I needed the money and more information about the record. After a successful client transaction, I exceeded my monthly plan by 200%. Eric was pleased, and to celebrate, he invited me to dinner as part of his job. We had drinks and got to talking. Eric told me all about himself, and I told him all the things I'd made up about myself. Strange feelings were playing around in me. For some reason, I wanted to kiss him so badly, but I remembered that I should not think about it. I'd gone to visit Peter over the weekend, and there was a stir at the orphanage. As I rounded the corner, I spotted Eric. Peter told me that he'd started coming in place of his father. He's doing charity work for our orphanage. They bought me a computer, and they also promised me heart surgery, Peter said. He had a congenital threshold. I was saving up a transplant for him. When I saw Eric, I was surprised that he decided to give a lot of money to children for treatment. Eric noticed me, and Peter gave away that I was his cousin. We spent time there, and afterward, Eric said he was sorry and then showed me the check. He had paid for Peter's upcoming surgery. No, why?
I just want to. You're a valued employee, and also, I like you.
Before I knew it, Eric was hugging me. It was unexpected, and I was tearing up inside with confusion. I hated myself for wanting what he wanted, but I shouldn't have, because he was the enemy of our family, just like his father. I had to find the tape. I realized it wasn't in the office, and I seized the moment and offered to go with him to his house. After spending the night there, when Eric fell asleep, I found his safe and guessed the combination, the same one he had at work. I pulled out the tape on the thumb drive, checked it on the computer, and saw a guide personally inject my mother with a drug. She was screaming and fighting back, and my brother wanted to stand up for her, but they pushed him away and he hit his head on a pole and went into a coma. I couldn't hold back my tears. I packed my things and went to the hospital to see my brother, and there I saw Guide, sitting on a chair next to my brother and saying,
I'm sorry for you. I thought you were going to be okay. I didn't want this fate for you. Your mother, she gave the okay, and then she started yelling. It wasn't my fault.
It was all you. You destroyed my family. Guide stood up from his chair.
So that's who you are. Now I remember you. You've grown up. Far gone. What, are you coming to take revenge?
It's all about you.
You don't understand, Marisa. Your mother, she gave her consent. You understand?
Everything's on the tape. You made her do it.
There's another tape where she voluntarily signed the contract. She needed the money.
You're lying.
I can prove it. I have it in my office. I don't believe you.
I jumped on him and started strangling him. There was a ruckus, and doctors came running and dragged me away. I was hysterical and crying. Then Eric came to the hospital.
I thought you were both here.
Don't you dare come near me. You or your father. I hate you. You ruined my whole family.
So you just used me?
Not just me, your assistant. Tell him thank you.
What about him?
His father was the one who pushed my brother on your father's orders. He's the one who gave me the tip on the surveillance tape. He's been helping me this whole time, and right now, he's on his way to the police with the tape.
I thought so. I knew it was him. He fabricated the whole thing and wants to put me in jail. And you know, who is he? It's his drug, by the way. He invented it. He wanted to get rich, but I wouldn't let him, so he's getting back at me.
I don't believe it.
It's true, Marisa. He's had a grudge against us for a long time. I just kept him close, and when I found out he was up to something, I fired him. Gave him a chance to run, but he took advantage of you.
Suddenly I heard my mother's voice behind me. She came up with a nurse. Mom, what are you doing here? Mom told me that this very helper came to her and asked her to write a report to the police, but she refused. I was ashamed to admit that it was all my fault. If I hadn't freaked out at the last moment, nothing would have happened to your brother. I couldn't believe it. I cried so bitterly, and I couldn't believe that I'd lived my whole life believing that Guide was evil. When we calmed down, Eric took me outside and told me that a heart was coming for Peter tomorrow.
I'll keep my word, like I promised. That's all we can do to help. I'm sorry this is how we met.
I was choking back tears because I didn't want that either. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life dreaming of revenge, but it came out that way on its own. Sometimes revenge is blinding. Now what? Now I have to learn to live my life all over again, from a new leaf, with all the shit that might not have happened.